Hi, and welcome to the Access Direct Opening Bell, your essential pre-market podcast. In just minutes, get key global updates, overnight trends, and market-moving factors that set the tone for the day. Whether you're a seasoned trader or just someone tracking the markets, this is your go-to briefing to stay ahead at all times. So let's dive straight in. Good morning on a Thursday, and we will start with US equities, which dropped as a key bond auction saw poor demand from investors. And that sent the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 down 1.6% and 1.3% respectively. Yesterday was all about the bond markets as investor concerns on America's growing budget deficit continue to grow. With Moody's downgrade of US debt, it is clear that unless policymakers are able to bridge the deficit, investors will demand higher rates from the government on its borrowings. Talking markets, the VIX surged over 15%. The dollar fell for a third day. The 10-year treasury yield hit 460. Gold continued its run higher, and NYMEX crude turned lower after making a failed attempt to hold $64 a barrel as US inventories rose more than expected and broader markets sold off. Meanwhile, the rupee ended largely flat at 85.64 and has gone sideways over the last four sessions, even as the dollar index has dropped back below the 100 level. Speaking stocks, the Nifty rose 129 points to finish at 24,813. The day was volatile, with a brief opening dip reversing into a steady climb that saw the index gain over 1%, which then gave up all gains before heading back up again. The India VIX climbed for the third day, ending 0.9% up at 17.5. The NSE 500, small cap and mid cap indexes also settled higher. Breadth was positive, with 72% of the NSE 500 stocks rising. All the NSE sectors gained, with realty and pharma moving 1.7% and 1.3% higher respectively. Elsewhere, the best and worst performers in the Nifty were Bharat Electronics, which rose 5.3%, and IndusInd Bank, which dropped 1.6%. Technically speaking, yesterday's price action formed a candlestick with a long upper shadow, which is not exactly what bulls would have liked to see after a 1% down day in the previous session. The market is barely holding on to the rising trend line originating from the early April lows, and bulls will have to take out 25,000 in a hurry for an all clear. 24,610 is immediate support that needs to hold, while 24,164 is critical. On the upside, resistance spans the 25,000 to 25,340 area. Time-wise, the next important period is the window starting the 28th of May and ending the 30th of May. Elsewhere, provisional data showed that foreigners invested 2,200 crores into domestic stocks yesterday, with the month-to-date inflow now standing at 15,400 crores. On to derivatives, and the Nifty's put-call ratio rose to 0.81 from 0.69, while that of the Bank Nifty moved to 0.79 from 0.77 previously. This was after accounting for the latest expiration. Nifty puts added were more than the liquidation seen in calls, and implied volatility fell about 50 basis points, which meant that on a net basis, market participants flipped to bullish. Options concentration for today's expiry shows a trackable range of 24,400 to 25,000. With the liquidation seen at the 25,000 strike, the biggest for calls, and the addition seen at the 24,400 strike, the largest for puts. Please note that we have ignored activity at distant strikes. Volatility traders have turned bearish, with the demand for calls 1% away from the at-the-money strike seeing a smaller rise than that for similar distance puts, which saw demand surge. Speaking net index options activity, foreigners and proprietary traders were positioned bullish, while retail investors were bearish. Elsewhere, foreigners' net short positioning in index futures fell by around 1,200 contracts to 37,500 contracts. Looking forward to today's trading session, the GIFT Nifty was down 40 points at 7 a.m. Asian equities were a sea of red due to overnight cues from the US. US index futures were slightly in the green this morning. Coming to stocks, Birlasoft, NMDC and Vedanta were at horizontal support, while Blue Dart, Renuka Sugars and Deepak Nitrite were at horizontal resistance. Bajaj Finserv and Chola Holdings were at trendline support, while GAIL and IPCA Labs were at trendline resistance. Talking breadth, 87%, 77% and 46% of stocks in the NSE 500 were above their 50, 100 and 200 day averages. HSBC PMI numbers are due from India, while initial jobless claims and S&P PMI numbers are due from the US later today. That is a wrap on the day's podcast. Please note that this podcast serves solely for informational purposes and should not be considered financial advice. For a comprehensive disclaimer, please visit our website. Thank you, and we will see you tomorrow at the same hour. Good day.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.